Hello and welcome to the 21st edition of the Hong Kong International Literary Festival. My name is Ravi Mattu, and I'm the Deputy Editor of it's Sunday. I'm the Deputy Asia News Editor of the Financial Times based here in Hong Kong. And I also sit on the board of the festival. So I'm really pleased to have a number of you here at the Fringe Club in Hong Kong and also online, a number of you who are on that camera. Just before I introduce this session on Afghanistan, featuring Francesca Borri, who's calling in from Kabul, and my colleague Stephanie Finlay, who is until recently based in New Delhi and covering Afghanistan for the Financial Times. Just a few bits of housekeeping for those of you here and also online. First of all, for those here, please, if you could turn off your phones or put them to silent, as well as any watches that might beep during the session. We will be taking questions during the session, but because of COVID restrictions, you'll need to write them onto a card, which my colleagues will be around handing to you, and they will then pass them along to Stephanie to ask Francesca. For those of you online, there is a box on the Crowdcast platform that you're using, a Q&A box on the lower right-hand part of the screen. Again, those will be translated onto a card and transmitted to Stephanie to ask Francesca where relevant. Before we begin, on behalf of the festival board, I'd very much like to express our gratitude to a few partners who helped make this festival work. First of all, the Italian Cultural Institute and the Italian MIA Festival for partnering with us to organize this event, the Fringe Club for hosting us, the Standing Committee on Language and Education and Research, or SCHOLAR, for their ongoing support, our book-selling partner, Bookazine, and our media partner, the Financial Times, for paying for Stephanie and I to live. And all of the consulates and local arts organizations who are partnering with us this year. And of course, all of the donors who support the festival and recognize the value of promoting literature and the written word in Hong Kong. Now, before I hand over finally, I'll very quickly introduce my colleagues in a bit more detail. Stephanie Finlay, as I said, was in New Delhi. Before that, she's reported in Nigeria and elsewhere in Africa. And she's just joined our desk here in Hong Kong to cover companies and markets. Francesca, I will let Steph do a bit more extensive or go straight into the session. But on that note, I'm going to hand over to Steph for this session on Afghanistan. Thanks so much.
Hi, thanks. It's really great to be here, really great to be in Hong Kong. So Francesca Borri is an Italian journalist. She did her master's in international relations and human rights. In 2012, she pivoted from human rights to journalism to cover the war in Syria. And from that, she wrote her book, Syrian Dust. In 2017, she was shortlisted for the European Press Prize for her reportage on jihadists in the Maldives. Her reports are exhilarating with poetic prose. Please welcome Francesca from Kabul. Hi, thank you so much for joining us today. Afghanistan, as we're seeing from all of the news reports, is heading towards a famine. How does it look on the streets of Kabul?
Looks awful, honestly, because you walk and children pass away in front of you. I mean, it happened to me just a few days ago. They pass out, or sometimes they pass away. I mean, they die from cold and hunger, and the winter has yet to start. From the outside, somehow, Kabul looks normal. Streets are crowded, but then, then you really look around, and first of all, there are next to no women around. The new rules of the Taliban are not clear, so nothing is really mandatory. There are no bans now, but more or less, of course, Afghans know, the Taliban. They have already experienced the Taliban, so So everybody's very careful, and women stay home just because they don't know really how, you know, the new regime, the new Afghanistan will look like. And so, yes, you see crowded streets, but you see actually long lines, long queues in front of banks, because the international community, you know, has yet to decide whether or not to recognize the Taliban. So for now, the central bank reserves are frozen, mostly in the United States, and basically all the economy is frozen. So you can't withdraw more than $200 from your bank account. Western Union agencies, you know, are not working, and everything is stuck. So you see Afghans queuing in front of banks, in front of the few embassies still open, which means Iran and Pakistan. They are trying to get a visa. They're desperately trying to leave. They sell whatever they have at home. That's what they do, or they basically look for any job. I mean, daily laborers, and or they look for food, any kind of food. So, I mean, yes, you see Afghans around, but it's not an, you know, we are not living ordinary times at all.
Thank you. Are you seeing people express a desire to leave, and can they leave? What is the mobility in and out of Kabul right now with the airport? The airport is basically still closed. There are just a few flights, but really few flights to Islamabad, so to Pakistan, and then from Pakistan you have to leave. But it's closed. It's closed, first of all, because, you know, the flights to Islamabad are extremely expensive, about $2,000 now. So no one can afford, you know, these flights to Pakistan. And in any case, you know, Afghans don't know where to go. It's not just a matter of, you know, reaching Europe. It's a matter of restarting a life. So for now, they are waiting and nothing else. Really waiting. How are the Taliban ruling in the city?
I think it's too early. It's too early to answer, because, you know, when we say the Taliban, actually, the Taliban are really not just one thing. There is a major split between two groups. We can say there is the so-called Haqqani network, which is very close to Pakistan, supported by Pakistan, very close to Al-Qaeda. And that's a different story. The Afghani guys, their leader is the current Minister of Interior. The Afghani guys control Kabul, control the airport, and they are really tough. They don't speak to women. They actually look away when they have a woman in front of them. For sure, they don't speak with journalists. But the majority of the Taliban are really different, and they clearly come from rural Afghanistan. You know, for me, honestly, I'm new to Afghanistan. I've been here just for 1 month. But what is really impressive, first of all, is that after 20 years and the $2.3 trillion war, I mean, the only development has been in Kabul. So rural Afghanistan, or, you know, whatever is outside Kabul, is a different story. And the majority of the Taliban come not from Kabul. It's actually the first time that they see Kabul. And I mean, they have nothing. They clearly grew up with nothing. They are like 20 years old, 25 years old, and you can ask them, you know, any question. Their life has been absolutely awful. With, you know, their families killed, you know, as collateral damage by American drones, with no school, with no job, with no opportunity whatsoever. I mean, you just look at them. They really look, you know, they come from a different world. They have nothing, absolutely nothing. That's the majority of the Taliban. And I have to say, it's very easy to deal with them. Maybe not the first day, but the second day is very easy to deal with them. They are just, you know, they just want a better life. So for now, you know, we have to wait, and we have to, you know, we have to see which Taliban basically will prevail. Well, we can imagine probably, because I mean, all the money goes to the Haqqani network, and they are much more powerful. But maybe it's early. You know, I think that what the Taliban will be depends also on what we will be.
With Siraj Haqqani in charge, the Haqqanis are one of the members of the Taliban with the FBI bounty on their heads. With these guys in key cabinet positions, how does that make it difficult for the international community to engage with the Haqqanis taking this key role and basically pushing out the Baradar faction who had handled the talks with the US in Doha over the course of the past 2 years?
It's complicated. It's complicated, and you know, when you talk with the few times you're allowed to talk with an Haqqani guy, I mean, I'm grateful. I'm just a journalist. I'm not, you know, I'm not a UN head or something, you know, and I don't have to take decisions, because of course, you know, the only leverage that the international community has, it's aid. The Taliban desperately need, well, two things actually, not only aid. They need aid immediately. They need, you know, 40% of Afghanistan GDP comes from aid, international aid. And really, I mean, Afghans can't survive the winter if aid doesn't come in again. So they desperately need UN agencies. They desperately need the World Food Program, the Red Cross, UNHCR, I mean, all UN agencies, and, you know, the major NGOs. Even if here, you know, we also to remind ourselves, because, you know, we all come from the West, that compared to 20 years ago, aid can come also from different countries now. Aid can come from Qatar, can come from Turkey, can come from Saudi Arabia. So we are not the only players anymore. But the Taliban need also skills. Because basically, if they have to rule somehow this country, govern this country, they need all the Afghans who are now abroad and the Afghans who are still here. And they are actually calling them and desperate trying to have them back at work. And of course, you know, Afghans don't really trust the Taliban. Some of them don't want to work for the Taliban. So it's just a matter of, you know, it's a moral choice, it's a political choice. So basically, the Taliban needs the international community. So this is the only leverage that the international community has. On the other hand, you know, these guys look really complicated. When you talk with them, or when they talk with other Afghans and don't realize that you are a foreign reporter and you are listening, I mean, for me, it's very strange because, you know, I've been living in Muslim countries, let's say, and Islamic countries since 2007. And I would say that, with one exception, the Maldives, I've never been in a country, you know, with such a radical form of Islam. So it's so normal for the Taliban to say, oh, you know, if you don't, I don't know, you don't do this, I'm gonna cut your head. You don't do this, I'm gonna kill you. You don't do this, I'm gonna cut your hand. Maybe, you know, they are not gonna do that because for now they are, you know, they are monitored, you know, by the international community. But who knows, you know, in the future, it's so normal for them it's so normal, that's the way how they fix, problems. You don't agree with someone, okay, I'm gonna kill you. And well, it's not very promising.
If they don't get the kind of legitimacy, or if they don't get the aid, how do you think the next couple weeks, months will play out for them, especially given that there is this divided leadership?
Well, honestly, I see hunger coming, of course. I see a deadly winter ahead, but I see also infighting, between the two main Taliban factions, and there are also other factions. And, we have yet to name the Islamic State, which is here, of course, and the suicide attacks already started. And, I think, especially Kabul will be like Baghdad. Baghdad, when a few years ago I was based there, we had 7-8 car bombs every day. And that's something that really affects, your daily life. So I see this winter a winter of suicide attacks. And still now, already now we walk around and we know that, especially in downtown Kabul, where I'm based, we know that every moment something can blow up. So we will see, and it's strange. Afghanistan has a fighting season. We have, in other countries, we have other kind of seasons, but here they have a fighting season, which is spring. So I think, spring will tell what kind of Afghanistan will be. I would say I'm 99% sure that won't be the Afghanistan that Afghans are dreaming about.
When we were talking before on our call, we talked about the Taliban and their capacity to keep the security situation under their control, which is what they have promised to the region, that they will be able to keep the Islamic State affiliates under control, Al-Qaeda operations under control. Being there, seeing their organization, do you think that those pledges are possible?
I don't think so, absolutely. I don't think so, because it's true that you see Taliban everywhere in Kabul and outside Kabul, really every corner. So from the outside, they seem to be really in control of the city and of the country. And you see actually the Afghani guys. It's very easy to recognize them because they look like American Marines. They actually have all, American weapons and equipment. So it's really very easy to recognize the Afghani guys. They're actually dressed like Americans. So, but a few days ago, when there was a major suicide attack against a hospital, a military hospital here in downtown Kabul, we arrived after 2 minutes. And we weren't allowed in because there was gunfire for 2 hours. They were trying to catch, basically, 2 other suicide attackers. And but of course, we were, all journalists, the few of us still here. We were outside, the hospital, and was so surreal somehow, because you could see all these Taliban coming to join the fight inside the hospital. They really wanted to be martyrs. So it's an honor for them, especially, against the Islamic State. So you could see all these fighters, on pickups coming, and they wanted to join the fight. And the point is that the Taliban who were at the entrance were afraid of infiltrators, because basically the Taliban have nothing. Have just a Kalashnikov, and they don't have they don't have a badge or something. They don't have a uniform, just a Kalashnikov. So they don't recognize each other. So at the entrance of the hospital, they checked, other Taliban more than us, more than journalists, and more than the few civilians who were basically passing by, because they were really afraid of each other, and which also means they don't really trust each other. They don't know each other. So if, you know, everybody here, everyone here can wear a turban and, you know, get a Kalashnikov and pretend to be a Taliban. So can you imagine what will happen? I mean, how can you really, how can such a country be safe and under the control of the Taliban? Really, everybody has a Kalashnikov, and everybody can look like a Taliban.
That story is just wild, that there's different factions of the Taliban showing up to this scene of the crime essentially and not being able to coordinate. Being there now with your background in human rights and all of the experience in war zones, do you feel that it had to be this way? What are your thoughts on the US withdrawal and the way that it was done and the obligation that the international community has now?
Well, when I was in Baghdad, you know, Baghdad is astonishing, you know, because after 1 minute in Baghdad, you really understand why, you know, it's been a disaster. The United States, I mean, really in Baghdad had no rules and no. Well, Afghanistan is 100 times worse than Iraq. And it's impressive. You can talk with anyone in Kabul and the corruption of, you know, the previous government. So basically, the international community, this is not something that happened only in Afghanistan, of course. It's quite typical, you know, of the international community. So basically, the locals who are in charge, you know, with our support, basically they are champions of corruption and mismanagement. So that's the first thing, you know, everyone tells you. And while, you know, the Taliban has this reputation to be honest, at least, and to be transparent, so they are brutal, but at least, you know, there is equality. There is this word equality that everybody repeats you in Kabul, where, you know, Kabul really don't like the Taliban because, you know, the Afghans who live in Kabul are the Afghans who had relationships and connections with the United States, with the international community. So this is really, you know, the city where you don't have Afghans supporting Taliban. And still they say, oh, you know, there is a main difference, it's equality. Now we are all equals in front of the law. And there is no corruption anymore. Then, of course, the price to pay is this, I wouldn't say brutality so far, because, you know, Kabul is quieter compared to before. I wouldn't say brutality for now, but for sure, you know, you never know what's going to happen when you have Taliban in front of you, because they can just kill you for nothing. And maybe, yes, maybe then, you know, there would be a Taliban commander punishing, you know, the Taliban soldier, but in the meantime, you are dead. But outside Kabul is different. Outside Kabul, everybody is with Taliban. And really, you just ask them, well, you don't need to ask how their life looked like in the last 20 years. You just look around, there is nothing. Poverty and American airstrikes, poverty and American airstrikes. So, you know, it's like when I was in Syria and Iraq at some point, especially in Syria, honestly, and when foreign fighters, you know, started to arrive and the so-called radicalization. And I was also always surprised, you know, not to have so many jihadists, but to have so few jihadists, actually, because when you see life, when you live with them, actually, which is what I do as a reporter, because I'm a jihadi specialist, so I spend my time with them. When you live the life they live, of course, you know, it's not you are not justifying them. You know, I always remind myself, you know, the Syrians who told me, look, anytime you will write of jihadists, spend a word for all the Syrians who went to the same and didn't join any jihad and didn't take any arm and any gun in their life. So of course, I'm not justifying the decisions of the Taliban or of jihadists or whatever, but it's really easy when you see the life they live. It's really easy to understand why they rise up and why they join jihad. And it's also very easy to understand why all others, those who don't fight, see them as the lesser evil. The majority of Afghans got nothing from 20 years of international presence, let's say, got nothing. So the Taliban, for them, are the lesser evil, the same way, rebels or Assad in Syria, depending on, where you were the lesser evil. It's in these countries, it's always a matter of the lesser evil. It's never a matter of, oh, this is my first choice. Never. I don't think the Afghan, would really choose the Taliban as a first choice, but they are the lesser evil.
On the poverty, a common or a theme in Afghanistan has, of course, been opium production, poppy cultivation. When the Taliban came into power, we heard their spokesman say, we'd like to move away from this economy. Do you think that's possible now?
Well, in the next future, no, because this is the only, there's nothing else. We have actually to ask ourselves, how come, that after 20 years, this country has no other, basically, nothing else than opium. And there is a famous, a book written by a Canadian journalist, actually, Graham Smith, and he remembers when he was here in Kabul during a kind of NATO briefing for reporters, and they were talking about all the US operations basically to destroy poppy fields, and reporters asked, okay, so what the economy of Afghanistan will be based on in the future. What will be the alternative, of course, to opium? And the answer was saffron. And then, the reporters look at the NATO commanders, like perplexed. And another NATO officer said, oh, well, Afghanistan can also export roses. So there's never been, a plan for the economy of Afghanistan. You see in rural areas, Taliban opened again some workshop of carpets, actually. That's the only thing. And there is nothing. And so, first of all, the international community has never had any plan for the economy of Afghanistan. We can't expect anything from the Taliban, unfortunately, because unlike other Islamist movements, first of all, like the Muslim Brotherhood, but even like al-Nusra in Syria or Hezbollah, I don't know, in Lebanon or Hamas, Gaza, what's really impressive of the Taliban, they are a pure resistance movement. They're just fighters. They never set up, their own charity network. They never set up a kind of shadow state. So what is the economy of Taliban? How they live, first of all. Their money comes from kidnappings, from extortion, from some taxes, at low level, from opium, of course, production. But they don't have a shadow state, which means that, they don't have any plan for the economy of Afghanistan. And I would say they seem not to have any plan for the government of Afghanistan as well, because probably they didn't expect, such a swift success. They didn't expect probably to be in power, immediately, and to be in power alone. So now they don't know what to do.
They had expected that they may get some sort of hybrid system with the past government. With the Taliban in power, what are you hearing from your sources about how it has affected jihadist movements around the world?
The Taliban success has been a I mean, a boost. I mean, morally, this is something that I already experienced in the past, because basically it doesn't matter that for us, for reporters, for analysts, you know, all these movements are very different from each other, and the countries where they are very different from each other. So just, you know, to talk about my own country, which is not Italy, actually, it's Israelis and Palestinians together. I never say Israel and Palestine, you know, because we don't know how many states we will have, if one state, two states, no states at all. So I'm based in Gaza. So think of Gaza, you know. I think that Hamas, Gaza, Palestine have nothing in common with Afghanistan, but really nothing. And still, you know, you have Hamas looking at the Taliban as a model, you know, and they say, oh, you know, that's what you have to do to defeat an occupation. And that's the proof that, you know, an occupation can't last forever. Now, the Israeli occupation has probably really nothing in common with what the United States did here in the last 20 years. But for Hamas, the Taliban now are a role model. And you can say the same, for example, for all the jihadists in Syria. And it's always been like that. We see differences, but for them, in the end, first of all, they are, you know, jihadists. And they really, you know, reinforced, at least, let's say, emotionally, and each other. So absolutely, you know, this Taliban success will have side effects everywhere. And regardless, you know, of the issue of Afghanistan as a breeding ground, as a training ground for I don't know, Al-Qaeda guys, it's a different issue. I mean, even if Afghanistan, you know, will keep out Al-Qaeda, will keep out, you know, the Islamic State, doesn't matter. Emotionally, you know, it's really, the Taliban are a role model now.
Okay. I think we're going to take some questions now. Or... Not yet. Okay. We'll take questions in just a little bit. I was wondering, how are you keeping safe? How are you going about your reporting in Kabul? Does it feel relatively safe on the ground, or are you having to take a lot of precaution while you move in different areas?
I would say safe, at least for my standards, which are the standards of a reporter, you know, who lived in Aleppo. So of course, I mean, compared to Syria, this is nothing. This is really nothing. Again, I mean, the only real danger is suicide attacks. You can happen to be in the wrong place in the wrong moment. For now, there is no war, actually. There is no front line in Kabul. And there are the usual...
Sorry, we can't hear you. Just 1 second.
Yeah, sorry. I was just saying, you know, that except for the lack of electricity, the lack of fuel, the lack of water, and it's safe, I mean, for a reporter. Of course, you know, I'm a foreign reporter. For local reporter, is quite different. For Afghan activists, I would say for Afghan citizens, broadly speaking. But at the same time, I think that until December, we can't say anything, you know, because for now, the Taliban world is looking at them, and especially looking at Kabul. So, of course, you know, life in Kabul is safe. as long as you can be safe in a country like Afghanistan, where again everybody has a Kalashnikov. But the Taliban know that we are watching them, so it's definitely safe. I mean, it will be definitely worse in the coming months.
The Taliban know that we're watching them, and yet so many girls still have yet to go back to school. Where do you think their policy towards women will eventually end up?
Well, that's interesting, because high schools actually, and universities are close to girls. So girls are allowed in class only until the 6th grade, which means more or less 12 years old. But of course, this is not an official policy, which means that basically, well, there is no official policy, because if you enter, in the main administration of Kabul, they don't even have pen and paper. So you can imagine how, now the government is working. The point is, one by one, especially outside Kabul, schools are opening again to girls. I would say not because of the international pressure, but because of a strong popular pressure from inside Afghanistan. This is for sure the main legacy, positive legacy of the international presence here. Afghans really, invested a lot in education. Most of them, now have a degree, have a master's degree, have PhD, and they really want, to study. All Afghan parents want their kids to have the best education possible. They all want them, to learn English, to learn, everything. So there is really a lot of pressure on the Taliban to allow girls to go to school again. And that's why you see, I'm actually now, in the main office of Save the Children. They see now that schools are opening again. But since the Haqqani network is against, the reopening of schools, and there is this radical wing of the Taliban, so far, there hasn't been any official decision. But practically speaking, schools are opening again, fortunately, and I think that this will be the pattern in the next months. So basically, the Taliban will give up, at least, and will do. I mean, they won't be the Taliban of 20 years ago, because no one is, none of us is the one of 20 years ago. But they have, somehow to show their radical wing that all these 20 years fighting, they haven't been for nothing. So I guess that what we will see on the ground, it will be quite different from the official decisions of the Taliban, fortunately for us.
Now from the audience questions, a couple of questions on what are you hearing when you're talking to young women? How are they feeling about their future in the country?
Again, there is a difference between Kabul and other areas of Afghanistan. In Kabul, it's of course, I mean, they basically lost their future. They are at home because high schools and universities are closed, or they are not working. And keep in mind also that there are many families where women are the only breadwinners, because basically, husbands and fathers left and abandoned family, or because, there are, of course, many, you can't imagine how many amputated and maimed men unable to work, of course. And in all these cases, it's basically they have nothing, because the only maybe woman working in a household is not working anymore. So for a young woman in Kabul, absolutely, is devastating. Outside Kabul, when they all tell you the same, they really, I mean, when the international community and especially the West speak of women's rights, they always tell you, well, the first right to a woman is the right to be alive. We have been killed by the Americans for 20 years, and that was not the way to respect our rights. And so again, there is really a gap between Kabul and Kabul is not Afghanistan.
Thank you so much. Another question here on what role is China playing in Afghanistan right now? Are you seeing it appear diplomatically in any major way? Is there talk about perhaps aid coming from China or Russia? And how might these countries?
Not yet. Not yet. China has different ways, to be present, mainly with the economy. And for now, we are still talking about security. So for now, the main player here is Pakistan. Of course, it's not China, it's not anyone else, it's Pakistan. The future of Afghanistan depends on Pakistan, and the economy of Pakistan depends on the United States and on Britain, basically. So these are the two countries which could play a role through Pakistan. And I would say that for now, Pakistan is the main player. Then you see Qatar second. Because Qatar, is basically the country through which the international community now speaks to Islamists. We have seen this role of Qatar in many other countries, in Gaza, first of all, but also in Syria, also in Libya. So that's why now, for example, the United States are using, basically everything is based in Doha. So I would say that for now, Qatar and Pakistan, Pakistan and Qatar are the main players. China will come probably.
This is a more personal question from the audience: is what is driving you to do this reporting? Why are you there in Afghanistan now?
I couldn't hear your question because there was an electricity cut. May you repeat it?
It's again from the audience, a more personal question. What is motivating you to be in Kabul right now, to be in Afghanistan, to see this? What is driving you? Can you hear me?
Now I can hear you again.
Okay. Sorry, third time is always the charm. So why are you there in Afghanistan right now? What is driving you?
So there was a personal question. This is the only thing that I heard. What was the question?
What is motivating you as a reporter in Afghanistan? Why are you there right now? What is driving you to do this coverage?
It's a complex answer. What motivates me, first of all, as a war reporter, I didn't decide to be a war reporter in my life, like most of us, I would say. We happened to be in a war, and we did not leave, which is what you know, what was Syria for me. Because when I switched from human rights to journalism, I just wanted to be in the Middle East during the Arab Spring. I just wanted to experience the Arab Spring, because for me was the story of my generation, not just the story, you know, of young Arabs. Because maybe you remember 10 years ago, when, you know, there was a revolution in Tunisia and then in Egypt. It was when, you know, there were youth movements everywhere in Europe and even in the United States with the Occupy movement. And so I decided to cover the Arab Spring. Then, you know, when I started, basically Syria was in the headlines, and I went to Syria and I started from Syria. Then, you know, I started covering a revolution, and then day by day, basically turned into a war. But when we realized, you know, that we were in a war, because we had airstrikes every day. I mean, at that point, I didn't want to leave. It was a moral choice. And I know can be something strange for you, but I can assure you that you would have done the same. You would have done the same. I mean, no one would leave at that point. No one would leave. It's really a moral choice. And then, you know, Syria, Syria is for me is so strange, you know, because we are here talking of another war, and probably you don't even know that the war in Syria is going on, that there are airstrikes still today in Idlib, which is, you know, the last rebel stronghold where actually 2 million people, 2 million Syrians live. There are airstrikes, you know, not every day, but 2 times, 3 times a week, and no one cares. And so the war is still going on, and for us it's over, because, you know, we are not talking of it anymore. So basically the reason why from Syria I moved to Iraq, and then now I'm here, is because basically we were totally forgotten when we were in Aleppo under airstrikes, and everybody was dying, and no one cared, and really no one cared. And once you experience that kind of indifference, I mean, I will care forever for whoever is experiencing what I experienced in Syria. So I'm here because of Syria. Basically, I'm here is the only way I have to honor Syrians somehow. I'm here, and they're still there. So absolutely is a moral choice. I know that in Europe probably, or among journalists, I mean, this idea that you do something because of a moral choice is not very cool. Is definitely a moral choice.
And then moving on from that, another question: how can we best help the Afghan people on the ground? What is the best way that people who want to care but may not know how make a difference if they can?
To make a difference, first of all, the international community has to unfreeze the central bank reserves and to allow aid in again. Because a few days ago, when this 45-day-old child passed away in front of me, literally, of cold and hunger. I mean, that story is now out across Europe, everywhere, and readers, of course, ask me, what can we do? How can we help? Because basically this child was living in a park in Kabul with 1,000 IDPs, 1,000 displaced Afghans, which is not, it's not so many. You can absolutely help them to survive the winter, but there is no way to receive money. I mean, there is no way to have money in. You can't, with a bank transfer or with a Western Union. All NGOs here have the same problem. So even if you are ready to help, what is really cruel, I would say, because it's a kind of collective punishment. There is no way to help because there is no way for money to enter this country. And, if the international community believes that this is a way to somehow stop the Taliban, I don't think, of course, that the Taliban or any other, armed group in the world use normal bank accounts, to get funds. So it's really just a collective punishment, against Afghans. The same way, there is a collective punishment on Palestinians in Gaza. This kind of measures, have no effect whatsoever on fighters, on politicians, because, the rich and the powerful, the well-off and the powerful have always, a way to get money. It's just the poor. You just hit the poor.
Yeah, it does seem like the money is not going through, and this is just hurting the ordinary people. Do we have time for more? Okay. This is kind of logistical reporting questions. One of them is, how are you able to move around and get your material and then sit down to write your fantastic pieces? And is being a female journalist even more dangerous or a disadvantage for you right now?
Reporting, each of us is different. So for me, basically, I live with the people I write about, which means I've never been in a country just for 3 days, 4 days, just for a story. I'm a traveler, first of all, so I'm curious, because usually, the details that make you really understand something don't come from an interview or from, it always happens, just by chance, the most significant things that you see or that you listen to. And so that's my way. I live with Afghans. And then at some point, I focus on some issues, I focus on some stories. I would say that the stories just are in front of you. So you have just to decide what is the priority. So for me, the priority was, hunger now. It was all around me, honestly. I could have written that story in 10 different ways. Being a female reporter is absolutely the opposite of what you might believe, because it's definitely easier. Again, each of us is different, so I'm not sure this would be the answer for other reporters. The point is, it's a little bit more complicated because we all are many things as reporters, no? I mean, we have a name, we have a reputation, and the more you go on, the longer, you go on, and the longer this reputation is. I mean, in terms of so the point is, we are many things. First of all, we are our passport, I would say, which means that if you are an American in Afghanistan or an Italian in Libya, you know, Libya is a former Italian colony, is definitely different from being a Norwegian, a Swiss reporter, you know, or, you know, a French in Lebanon. So first of all, we are our passport. And secondly, for example, what makes a difference is I'm a writer, no? I can just go around with nothing. I mean, can just take notes or have strong memory. I can even avoid, you know, to take notes. Think, you know, about the CNN crew when they arrive, you know, and they are absolutely, you know, and everybody in the street stops, you know, and look at the CNN crew. So, you know, for TV crews, for photographers, is definitely more complicated than for writers. Writers can always, you know, blend in. And then, of course, you know, I'm lucky because I look Arab. I'm not blonde, you know, that's another asset, I would say. But then, of course, you know, there's a difference. You are a man or you are a woman. And, you know, here it depends. Because when as a war reporter, you have a reputation, which means at the beginning it's difficult. I'm speaking of when I was in Syria, no? Because they have, look, fighters don't like, you know, the idea of having reporters around on the front line. You can be even, you know, the most expert of male war reporters, but you are a burden for fighters. Even when you are embedded, you know, with, I don't know, with the American army, you are a burden for them because physically you are not like a Marine. If they need, you know, to run away, they have somehow to take care of you. So no one wants journalists on a front line. So at the beginning it's always complicated. And when you are a woman, it's more complicated. But once, you know, you have this basically reputation that you were the last Western journalist to leave Aleppo, well, no one is going to, you know, to argue with you about your ability to stay on a front line. So for me, that's something, you know, over. And most of the times, you know, we have even more experience of guns. It happened to me like a few days ago, you know, when they, when basically they, there was a just, let's say, an argument among Talibans with Kalashnikov, you know, and the way they were carrying RPGs and Kalashnikovs, and we told them, oh, look, come on, guys, be careful because you're gonna kill one of your guys, you know, in this way. So we actually told them how to, you know, how to use in a safe way. An RPG was a little bit weird, you know, but we had more experience than this young guy who had just found an RPG in a US, you know, depot of weapons, and he was really using it the wrong way. But the point is, now when you are a woman, you know, of course, in Islamic countries, it's easier because, of course, you know, you can wear a niqab, you can wear a burqa, you can wear a hijab, no one is going to look at you. And usually, I mean, physically, you are not perceived as a threat, no? And then, you know, all this kind of stupid rivalries among men, you know, so when there is a male reporter, it's everybody, you know, they are all men and they have to show who is the strongest and all these stupid things typical of men, you know. When they have a woman in front of them, a young woman, I'm always like, you know, their daughter, their girlfriend, their wife, their whatever, you know, they always, when they are with me, they always miss, you know, the young woman of their life. And so they start to talk basically because in front of a woman, they are not afraid of being vulnerable. Just yesterday, I was working on my next story with basically a Talib, quite a high-ranking Talib. But at some point, he was just crying in front of me because he was remembering his son, basically. And he cried with me, you know, for 20 minutes. And I was thinking, you know, come on, this man probably is the first time that he's speaking to a Western woman and to a foreign woman, probably, you know. And with me, he feels so safe, you know, that he can basically cry in front of me without feeling, you know. So that's really an asset if you are a woman. They really open their doors and not just their physical doors. because they are not afraid of you. They are not physically afraid and they are not emotionally afraid. It's quite the opposite. So it's absolutely an asset. But I would say when we think about our reputation is not just about, you know, being a woman, a man, whatever. We are what we write. So basically, you know, my main asset is, well, I've been always living with the poor, and I'm based in Gaza. I have this deep connection with Palestinians, even if I write for Israel's largest newspaper, with their agreement. There is an agreement between Israelis and Palestinians. And for example, you know, Palestine, which politically is forgotten now, no, is not for sure in the headlines, but emotionally is really something, you know, is crucial for any Muslim around the world. So when you come from Gaza, when you come, you know, well, that's something that really opens you any door. And the idea that, for example, you know, as a freelancer, have been struggling for the rights of freelancers, no? So the idea that, I don't know, as a journalist, I'm the author of 4 investigations, all of them on Italy. Well, the idea that when there is something wrong in your own country, you stand up. You just don't come here, you know, in the Middle East or in Afghanistan to point your finger and tell the Taliban, or, you know, you should do this, you should do that. I come from a developed country and you are not. No, you know, as a reporter, I've been as tough with Italy as I've been, you know, with Hamas in Gaza. And so, again, this is equality, which is really a main principle of Islam. So when, you know, they see that you treat in the same way a story in the West and a story in the Middle East, no? Especially about women, no? I know very well, you know, what being a woman in an Islamic country means. But come on, I come from Italy, where a woman gets killed from a husband or a partner, you know, every 2 days. So when I speak about women's rights, you know, I don't come exactly from Sweden. I'm not exactly, you know, in the position of teaching something to some, because I also see, you know, the dark side of my own country or of my own culture. So, and that's what my reputation is based on. So of course, you know, it's easy because I'm a woman. Probably it's easy also because of other reasons.
Thank you so much for your time, for this fascinating conversation. I hope you stay safe as long as you're in Kabul and elsewhere, and that you find Italian coffee at least once while you were there.
Fantastic. Stephanie and Francesca, give them a little round of applause before I close off. In the right place. Thank you to Francesca and Stephanie. But Francesca, obviously, I want to apologize. Some technical issues, obviously, during the session, particularly for those online. But I think it's an indication of just the challenges of operating in a country like Afghanistan. Francesca very modestly said, "I'm glad I'm just a journalist." But of course, I know how hard it is to operate in a country like that. So we're extremely grateful for your time and illumination of what is one of the most heart-wrenching stories around right now. For those in Hong Kong, I'd also say next door to the fringe of the FCC, there's a great photo exhibition by Marcus Yam, who's a journalist for the LA Times, which again gives a very poignant insight to the horrors going on there. Thanks, Stephanie. Well done. Fantastic. Thanks to all of you here in the audience who asked some great questions. All of you online as well. A couple of things before we go. One, buy Francesca's books. You can do so here in person or online. There's a little tab on the Crowdcast, I think, for Bookazine. You can go to their website and also do that. Obviously, follow Francesca and Stephanie online and read all of their great stuff. Stick around today because there are more events here and elsewhere for online and in person. And finally, if you are not a donor but like to support our mission of the festival, please do think about giving us some money to encourage spreading the word and the value of literature in this great city of Hong Kong. Thank you so much for joining us, and please do stick around and spread the word. Good night.